Welcome to Responding to Literature. Why is it important to learn to respond to literature? Well, in the case of college, analyzing a literary text is critical, interpreting process. For that reason, the process must begin with a deep reading of a poem, short story, play, or other literary work. When you research and write the essay, you assume that your readers have also read the text, and your aim is to illuminate some not fully understood dimension of the work, the motivations of a particular character, the image, patterns of a lyric, the historical context of a Renaissance play, and so on. In the workplace, you have to learn to respond and analyze emails, reports, and other written missives. In the community, you need to stay abreast of local happenings through local and social media. When asked to respond to literature, it is called a literary analysis, and it requires you to analyze, examine methodically and in detail, interpret to explain the author's meaning or intent, and finally to evaluate to judge the value of the piece. The first step is to understand what you are reading. You need to put together the facts presented and figure out the literal meaning. The meaning at its most basic, with no metaphors or symbols, just the facts of a piece of writing or lyrics of a song, a short story, even a film. If you struggle with vocabulary, then be resourceful and look up the words to find the meaning. That is your responsibility. In order to fully comprehend something, you need to understand the words being used. Once you have a grasp of the literal meaning, then you are able to move on to the analysis, uncovering the deeper meaning that you have discovered through reading and rereading. And you do that by answering the following questions. What are the main parts or elements of the work? Elements are characters, the setting, the plot. You need to ask why the piece was written. What does the literary work mean, or what does it imply? What does it suggest about the human condition? Well, the human condition are simply our emotions, and what emotions were triggered by the reading of the piece, the listening of the piece, or what have you. How does it expand your understanding? Does the reading the piece help you to understand something you may be unfamiliar with? Using your prior knowledge, can you make connections with your own life, and by doing so, create insights? Simply analyze, think deeper about a piece. Once you understand the literal meaning, it's very important to try to discover the author's intent and purpose, and you do that by analyzing. When you evaluate a literary piece, you are judging its validity as well as its merit. You need to ask yourself, was the writer successful in his or her purpose? Was the purpose worthwhile? Quite possibly life-changing? You as a reader have the power to judge, but you need to be prepared to provide proof for your reasoning. So you need to think about how you would assess the work's plausibility. Are the words and tone appropriate for the purpose and audience? Does the author achieve his or her purpose? All of these things are important when it comes time to evaluate a piece. Using literary analysis in writing. It is important that you read and reread, take notes, highlight the text, basically tear it apart until you are so comfortable with it, you fully understand it. You need to search for a meaning that you want to share, something that you found poignant. You need to interpret the meaning by identifying its elements. State an analysis that supports your specific interpretation. For the next paper, which will be the compare and contrast, you will be required to read and analyze the short story Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. You will follow the steps in this presentation, read and reread it, take notes, and come up with an analysis. You will then watch and analyze the Shawshank Redemption, the film, following these same steps. And then when it comes time to come together next week, you will write a compare and contrast literary analysis on the two works.
that studying literature involves finding a deeper meaning to a text. When writing about literary works, we're expected to mentally dive below the surface in order to come back up with big ideas. But you may find yourself looking at the flat page of a book, wondering how deep it can really go. How do we reach those ideas that turn into great essays? Well, there are two crucial thinking steps that can lead us in the right direction: practicing insight and acknowledging complexity. Insight is the ability to arrive at an intuitive understanding of a big idea using only small clues to get there. If you're practicing insight, you'll be able to use observations about character behavior to figure out their true emotions and motivations. Pay attention to little things, because they add up to what is really meaningful. For example, if you consider a character like Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, who openly declares his dislike for Miss Lizzie Bennet, you might at first assume he's just a mean guy. But using your powers of insight, you're noticing other smaller things. How Darcy's eyes linger on Lizzie's face and how he seems all flustered when she's around. Add to the mix your knowledge that Mr. Darcy is in a much higher social class than Lizzie, and your sense of insight should be telling you that there's something more here. In this case, it will tell you that Darcy's surface behavior is in conflict with his true feelings of attraction, because the difference in wealth between himself and Lizzie makes him feel that it'll never work. Thinking about all those small clues gives us insight about some of the big abstract ideas within the novel that we can approach in an essay. Appearances versus reality, the power of wealth and social stratification, and the unpredictable nature of love and attraction. Look at that! Deeper meaning. The second step to a sophisticated analysis is acknowledging complexity. Let's face it, in both life and literature, situations are complicated due to social forces like relationships, moral codes, personal desires, and power structures. This means that there are, at any given time, multiple factors that shape what is true. In order to acknowledge complexity in your writing, refrain from making broad generalizations about a text or establishing quick, simple judgments about a character. Explore each facet of your subject carefully, and make sure to consider multiple influences on events. Explain the tension of multiple forces that create the story. For example, a basic analysis of Toni Morrison's Beloved, where the protagonist has killed her own child rather than allow her to grow up in slavery, might sound like this. Setha murdered her own daughter. This act was wrong, and causes the ghost of the child to haunt her throughout the novel. These observations are simplistic. They don't acknowledge all the different forces that contribute to what the character has done. Try something like this instead. A culture of slavery disturbs the ability to determine what is morally right. Setha's past experiences with violence reinforce the fear she has for her child's fate, and transform the murder into a protective act. As the novel progresses, Setha is haunted both by the angry spirit of her daughter and by the memories of everything else slavery took from her. Here, we see those influential forces at work, and we've shown off our ability to understand the complicated nature of the human experience, which again allows us to access those big ideas that reveal the deeper meaning of a story. Ideas in this case, like the parameters of maternal instinct, the consequences of injustice, and the question of whether or not ethics can even exist in a corrupted moral system. It's impossible to sit down and write an amazing essay about literature without first thinking about it. Before you hit the keys, go back to the text and fish out the small moments, the complicated moments in the story. Line them up in your mind, practice insight, acknowledge complexity, arrive at some big ideas. Before you know it, the deeper meaning will be close at hand.
Fantastic. I wish you the best in responding to Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, the short story by Stephen King, and watching the film The Shawshank Redemption. Good luck, and if you need any help, please feel free to contact me and I will do my best.